And then when you look at teams that are somewhat I'm worried about down the stretch, I think, when I looked at it, depending on what New England did last night, which obviously they did nothing, I was going to say that it would be the Dolphins that would have to look over their shoulders. But I feel like the Colts at 8-4, because of Tennessee, I think the Colts the Colts are going up against the Dolphins, the Raiders, Tennessee to try to win the division. But if they, for some reason, lose to the Raiders, now they're in a wild card spot. They're thinking division, but then at some point they're going to have to start to think about being in a wild card spot because they lose to the Raiders. And I'm not so bullish on them, although the quarterback, Phillip Rivers, has turned things around slightly in not turning the football over at alarming rates or making you feel that way. But at some point in time, he could become Phillip Rivers. The pumpkin will go back to something at some point in time.
Now, that game is going to be in Las Vegas on Sunday. And one thing to mention, Key, and this is always something you want to bring up because it's the Raider audience, and you always have mentioned how they have the worldwide fan base. You mentioned the Colts, but this is a giant game for the Raiders because much like this Bucs-Vikings game, these two teams are right next to each other in the standings. It's a little bit different here. The Colts are hanging on to that seventh playoff spot, that seventh and final playoff spot in the AFC. This year we're going 7 in each conference, and the Raiders are right behind them in the 8th spot at 7-5. So this is a critical game for the Colts, as you mentioned, whether they're division dreaming with Tennessee or just trying to hang on. But this is a big game for John Gruden, too. Huge game.
Should have lost 3 in a row.
It is. Yeah. They took care of business last year against the Colts in Indianapolis, and that was kind of like a turning point for them, and then they went back to being the Raiders, right? I mean, and so when you look at it, the Raiders are not catching Kansas City within the division. They're not going to catch them. So their only hope to making the playoffs is a wild card, where Indianapolis can still win the division if something were to go south with Tennessee.
I just I trust the Colts defense, and the Raiders haven't been playing good football at all. I mean, they lost to the Chiefs in that game that they lost to the Falcons. It was just, 43-6 was damn.
They didn't play good.
Right? And then against the Jets, the Jets gave them the greatest gift of all time with that last play. I don't know if I trust their offense going into that game against the Colts.
Well, both of these teams have been Jekyll and Hyde for the most part throughout the entire season. They both have, and the Raiders are at home, much like you mentioned. The interesting thing about it is they play against a team, or better yet, Phillip Rivers is going to play against a team that's very familiar with his, tenure with the Chargers, whether it was in San Diego or whether it was in Los Angeles. So there's some familiarity with him at the quarterback spot. They beat up on the Indianapolis Colts, although he wasn't the quarterback for him last year when they went to Indy and won that football game. So, it's not the same because of the pandemic. It won't be crazy in Raider country in Las Vegas. But at the same time, you are on the road. You are in an unfamiliar territory and environment. And this game will be one of the nice ones on the slate.
We should mention that at the Chiefs, and this is obvious to Key's point, that they're going to run away with the division. If they win any of their remaining games, and I think it's pretty fair they could win all of their remaining games, but if they win any of their remaining games, the AFC West is theirs. The interesting dichotomy here, this is interesting, Key and Jay. Think about this. Right now, Tennessee and Indy are both 8-4 football teams. They split their regular season series, each team winning on the other team's home field. But because of the way it works out, and Key makes a great point about where the Colts are at this point, the Titans sit there right now in the 4 spot, so they would be the division leader right now. They would host a playoff game, and having the very same record of the Colts, and they split the regular season series, but despite that, and having the same record as Tennessee, they sit at 7, and they are teetering. And that's why I think the Colts, this is as critical for the Colts as anyone else. I mean, they have the exact same resume as Tennessee, but they need a telescope to see them in the AFC standings.
Well, that's why from my standpoint, from last night to today, it changed significantly once New England lost that football game, which was like in the first quarter. But I started to think more about Indy and less about Miami in this situation because the Colts are now, the Pats are now gone.
Correct.
Miami could just play and get a spot. But Indy is, because of the Raiders situation, will be scratching and clawing.